Day and welcome to In Our Community. My name is Liz Holtz and I'll be your host this day. Our guest today is Pam SpahrThis. She's the founder and CEO of Inspired Caregivers and a leading authority on the psychological effects of caregiving on elders and those with cognitive impairments such as brain injuries, dementia, or Alzheimer's, to name a few. Tonight we're going to be discussing the challenges that are faced by caregivers during the holiday season, and Pam's going to be providing us with some helpful hints for caregivers to keep the joy and keep the ho-ho-ho in their holidays. Pam, welcome.
Thank you, Liz.
Pam, let's start out by, how about giving us a few examples of things that can make the holiday season particularly challenging for caregivers and their loved ones?
Well, there's so many challenges, Liz. If a caregiver has a family, and if they work, and if they also care for an elder or someone with a brain impairment, there's a lot to be stressed about during the holidays. There are Christmas pageants and there are Christmas plays, and there are all sorts of activities, perhaps at work, that people need to take into consideration. And there may be plays and pageants that the kids or the grandkids are going to. All of those are very important and they're very big challenges. Also, we can't forget about important things like Christmas dinner or Hanukkah dinners, and that requires an awful lot of extra work. And of course, there's decorating. All of those things are going to take up a lot of the caregiver's time, and it gives them very, very little room for themselves.
So I imagine balancing priorities is something that becomes extremely important at this time of year.
Yes, it does.
Like you said, so Pam, can you tell us, all these new added responsibilities on top of the responsibilities that they already have throughout the year? It sounds like something that can quite easily lead to high stress levels and a sense of overwhelm.
Yeah. Overwhelm is so prevalent. We as women tend to be responsible for the holidays, all of the holidays, and that means all the planning and all of the organization. And in a lot of cases, a lot of women don't feel that they can ask for help. Now, in my family, when I was growing up, I grew up around a lot of women who were expected to take on huge amounts of work and never complain. But nowadays, I look for help.
Well,
a caregiver.
I was going to say, that sounds like, something that's definitely needed during the holidays.
Definitely. I mean, caregiving is a full-time responsibility. And raising a family is a huge responsibility and a full-time job. If the caregiver also is an interior decorator and an event planner, that's almost too much for people to handle.
Well, and imagine sometimes you have to prioritize what you do. You have to choose one event over another, and things like that might possibly add to the caregiver feeling guilty.
Well, yeah, and one of the other things that I think is very, very important is to get help. Ask for help.
So, Pam, can you give us some suggestions on what a caregiver can do to help keep their stress levels to a minimum and keep them in check during the holidays?
Well, of course, overwhelm can lead to guilt. I mean, what would happen if the family wanted to go out to, maybe the husband wanted to take the whole family out to get a Christmas tree, but maybe the elder has a doctor's appointment. Who's going to win? Maybe the caregiver's daughter has a recital and the loved one just has a meltdown. I I mean, what happens then? That's the overwhelm, that's the guilt.
Well, and I imagine, it can be quite an emotional time for people. So what can they do to, kind of help, keep their loved ones' stress levels at a minimum as well?
If the caregiver gets very stressed, then the loved one is going to feel a lot of stress. So one of the problems with people with Alzheimer's and dementia is that they are very, very susceptible to the emotions of their loved ones. So if a caregiver wants to have a lot of peace in their holidays, don't let them see you sweat.
It's probably good advice. And Pam, I understand that you have a really cute Christmas story that you experienced as a caregiver. Would you like to share with us?
I would love to, and you'll love this story, Liz. My husband has dementia, and he's had dementia for about 3 years. So last year, I bought a little Christmas tree, and I decorated it, and I put the gifts under the Christmas tree. And I thought, if I'm out of the room for about 5 or 10 minutes, nothing can possibly happen. So I went out to the kitchen to fix dinner. When I came back, he had unwrapped all of the presents, and he was so proud of himself. So after I put him back to bed at the end of the evening, I took all the presents and I rewrapped them and I put them under the Christmas tree. And the next morning, I got my husband up and I got him into his chair and I went into the kitchen to start breakfast. And when I came out, he had unwrapped all the Christmas presents again. So third time was the charm. This time I put the Christmas presents away so he couldn't see them, and he was so thrilled with all of his presents on Christmas Day. He was so thrilled that he kept giving them back to me because he didn't understand that they were for him.
That is so cute. And Pam, during the holiday season, there seems to be like a lot of activity, a lot of hustle and bustle. And how does that impact caregivers and their loved ones?
Well, of course, there are so many more demands on the caregiver. There are parties to give, and there are dinners to throw. All of the decorating, of course, that has to be done. There are children's activities that need to be taken into consideration. As I said before, there might be work activities. There might be Christmas parties at work. All of those are part of the hustle and the bustle. And it also leads to caregiver burnout to some degree because of the competing demands.
Well, that makes sense. The other thing is that a lot of times over the holiday period, we hear especially, elders and people that have cognitive impairments and things might be more apt to become depressed or to have increased medical issues. So can you tell us a little bit about how that impacts the caregiver and their loved one and what they can do to kind of keep an eye out for that?
Well, oftentimes the holidays are a very sad time for the elders. They remember years gone by when they had wonderful Christmas parties, perhaps with people who have passed on. They may have had wonderful Christmas parties with family members who now live very far away. The loved one may feel very bad because they can't go visit with loved ones or family, who are far away. Their health may be way too fragile. One of the other problems that can happen during the holiday season with elders is that their illnesses may get worse. And it is rather common. And so the caregiver needs to keep that in mind also.
So they just need to really pay attention to the elder and notice whether they're being a little more melancholy than normal, whether they're being a little more fussy or fidgety than normal, or of course if their health takes a turn for the worse, to really check into it, to catch it at the beginning rather than later.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, Steph. And Pam, quite often, all these different family gatherings and things like that involve either children or grandchildren or even great-grandchildren. And I imagine that has some effect on what goes on with both the caregiver and the loved one during this time as well. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacts the family dynamic?
How many times, Liz, have you and I been to family events and there's a little 2-year-old who is having a meltdown and continues to have a meltdown? The holiday seasons are a wonderful, fun, adventurous, exciting time for kids. But oftentimes, the kids become overwhelmed. And they may not be able to process everything that's happening around them. If they become very agitated or angry or upset and a loved one is nearby, it's going to affect the loved one. They're going to become agitated also. So that's something else that the caregiver should be very conscious of.
Right, and how their children's moods might affect them, the elder as well. Can you give us some suggestions for what caregivers can do to be less stressed out and make things easier for themselves over the holidays?
Well, yeah. There are two very big ones that I can think of. Number one, the most important thing is to be able to plan and organize everything. Well, at least as much as a person knows in any particular time. Do the planning. Know when you're supposed to be at a particular place. Is there something that you need to do? Is there something that children or grandchildren need to do at any particular point in time? Just having that on a calendar is huge. But then planning out trips to the store and things like that are very important. Because if the caregiver is like me, I try to go to 5 or 6 different places in one trip, and it's easier if it's all planned out. And the other thing is to arrange to have extra help available during the whole holiday season. It will take a lot of pressure off of the caregiver. If the caregiver is giving a party or if it's a particularly busy day, if there's an outside caregiver available, then it means it's going to be a lot less stressful for the caregiver. Now, some other options instead of just an outside caregiver is that they might use an adult daycare or they might use a senior center. But all of these will help the caregiver get through the holidays, and it will make evening special events much better. And of course, if you're having a party in your home, if you have arranged to have a caregiver watch your loved one, then you can concentrate on the guest.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. One of the things we've been talking about a lot about the caregiver and the immediate family, especially the loved one that has impairments in their needs during the holidays. But what can a caregiver do to make certain that the other members of the family don't feel like they're being left out or ignored due to the additional constraints caused by not only the holiday shopping, but the need to try to, keep the elder or the loved one with a cognitive impairment, calm and, with all the activity going on around them?
Liz, in the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, sometimes the kids can get kind of pushed aside. If they're having a bad day, if they have extra activities, if they want to go visit friends and it's a bad day to do it, sometimes it's very hard on the elder, both the elder and for the caregiver, to make time for them. So I go back to my planning of my organization, and that is plan for extra time for the kids and the grandkids, time for each individual child during the holidays. It can be quiet time. It can be just talking to the child. It could be reading together. It could be sitting and watching a movie together. It could just be chatting about the holidays and what they want to do and what their expectations are. And the other thing is that as part of the family, working with a loved one, and that is to maybe bring out a scrapbook and reminisce with them, or play some old music, the Bing Crosby music, or someone of that ilk. Or they could watch movies, something like White Christmas, something that will evoke a prior time for them.
That sounds like great information, Pam. So also, one of the things is that, how does the, not only the caregiver but the rest of the family assure that the loved one is really having an enjoyable time throughout the holidays?
Well, then again, it boils down to several different points. Number one is really watching them, making sure that they're comfortable, giving them extra care. Also to, as I said, get out a scrapbook and just sit with them and reminisce, or play the music that they like so much. If you're going to parties and you're going to activities, or if the caregiver or the children are going to activities, there's no reason why that caregiver or the kids can't report back to the grandparents and tell them all about what's happening.
Yeah. So, also, sometimes, there is so much going on that sometimes, elder people or people with cognitive impairments get upset and they get agitated, and it's because they're feeling overwhelmed or like there's just too much going on around them. What can a family do to kind of minimize that from occurring?
Well, one of the things that is very important, Liz, is a lot of times the loved one becomes the center of attention. And oftentimes they will become agitated because they are in the spotlight. So one of the suggestions that I make is that caregivers put the loved one off to the side during a family gathering, not out of the room, but just a little ways away from being the center of attention. And that way the elder can still participate, but if they have a meltdown or something, it won't ruin everybody's day.
Yeah. That sounds like a very good suggestion. And so do you have any other additional suggestions on, how caregivers can deal with all these added pressures without going crazy?
Oh, yeah, several. If you're making cookies for the Christmas party, make them well ahead. Do everything you can ahead of time. Making the cookies a couple of weeks ahead and freeze them. If you have to buy gifts, buy them now or buy them online. Avoid the last week before Christmas, because we all know you can never find a parking spot in a mall. The grocery lines are 10 times as long. if you're going to buy a Christmas tree, drive around and visit some of the Christmas tree lots before the family gets involved in it so that you know when they're going to be open and if they even have a Christmas tree that you're interested in. Because they may have sold out of what you want.
That's true. And, and of course, I think, you mentioned before, get help. Ask for help. If the grandkids are over, certainly they could help baking the cookies. In fact, that might even make for a wonderful family of time. A way to spend time with the children while still accomplishing the goals that you need to do.
Yeah, and another suggestion is have a neighborhood potluck, bring everybody else, feed them all, and then have them decorate your Christmas tree.
Oh, that's a great idea. And of course, I think we all know things are going to be, things will go wrong. There's always Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will. And I imagine, the best thing to do is for people just to accept that that's going to be the case. It's going to take time to go to the grocery store. It's going to take the added time. There's going to be delays, anywhere near any of the shopping centers. So, I guess being patient would be very important.
Yes, yeah. And understand that, as you said, not everything is going to go right. Make it all right that things go wrong. It's very likely that something major is going to happen, like you're going to burn the mashed potatoes. But make it okay and make it a story that you can tell now at a dinner party. Or the loved one may have a meltdown in the middle of a family gathering. Make that another dinner story.
Yeah. So, we've been talking a lot about, the caregivers and dealing with their loved ones and dealing with their family. But what can caregivers do for themselves to take care of themselves during all this hustle bustle time?
Well, here are a couple of tips. If the caregiver is out running errands, they should leave a little bit of time and stop and have a cup of coffee or a cup of hot chocolate. I mean, you deserve the time. You can have the time. If the caregiver is so inclined, get up before the loved one gets up in the morning and just have a nice long hot shower and relax, or take a nice hot bath. And the other thing is that they can just sit back and relax and read a book for 15 or 20 minutes if they've got a few minutes just to take care of themselves.
That's great. So, I know a lot of times during the holidays, caregivers need to take their loved ones with them, whether it's going out shopping, whether it's going to visit family and friends, or attending seasonal events and celebrations. Do you have any suggestions on dealing with that?
Well, when visiting or running errands and things like that, the most important thing that I can tell them is it's best to leave their loved ones at home. And the reason I say that is that with all the hustle and bustle out there, it's almost overwhelming for somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's or brain injury to process that. If you leave a loved one at home, also, you can get twice as much done, and it will be far less stressful on you.
And Pam, I understand that you have a really unique way that you deal with things, and a charming story about how you utilize this particular strategy. Would you like to tell our viewers?
As I mentioned, I think I mentioned that my husband has dementia, and he's had it for several years. But one of the things while he was ambulatory that we liked to do was to drive over to Scotts Valley on a Sunday, because a Sunday drive for me was something that was fun and interesting that I did when I was a child. This Sunday, we went to Scotts Valley and we visited one of my favorite gift shops. And as we were wandering around the gift shop, my husband kept making these shooing gestures toward me. And finally I realized that what he wanted to do was he wanted to buy me a present that was a surprise. So while he was gathering up the treasures, I went to the front of the store and I told the woman who's the clerk that my husband had dementia and I thought he wanted to buy something for me that was a surprise. And if he said anything odd or if he acted odd, would she just kind of act as if he was perfectly normal? And then I would pay her for whatever he bought. And she was so sweet. She was just so wonderful to Bob. Bob brought up the things that he wanted to buy, and she packaged them all up in pretty paper, and she put it into a very nice little bag and gave it to him. And once we got out of the store, he gave it to me, and I was in tears. It's one of those very, very special moments. It's the type of thing that I think that Christmas is all about.
That is so sweet. That is a very sweet story. And I understand you also, when you go out in public, you have a business card that you use sometimes to help alert people to your situation. Can you talk about that for a moment?
As I mentioned before, when caregivers are going to go out and run errands, they should leave their charge at home. But if for some reason where they have to take their charge out, then they can do what I do, and that is to bring this business card that you mentioned, and on it says, "This person has dementia, your patience is appreciated." And maybe if we're going out to lunch, I will give it to the wait person at a restaurant. My husband is very gregarious, and so he sometimes stops strangers on the street to ask them questions. So I'll give the stranger that card, and I'll also give it to people who might be clerks in stores. And what it does is it respects both my husband and his illness.
That is a wonderful tip, Pam. Lastly, I understand that you have a number of articles and resources on your website, and including a downloadable PDF of holiday tips for caregivers in both English and Spanish, and that can be found at www.inspiredcaregivers.com on your Words of Wisdom page, and then there's also a Caregiver Resources page.
Absolutely, and I really, really encourage people to go out there and take a look at it. Because there's a lot of information. I do a lot of writing on aging and on caregivers for Concordia University and also for Quantum.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam. It was a pleasure to have you this evening.
Thank you.